They say if you're not nervous, you don't respect your audience, so I respect you. Yeah.
And it's quite a tough act to follow that, isn't it?
Willem was so good, I think you're not going to get much more wisdom from me, but I'll try.
Well, we're going to test that because we've only got 55 minutes. So that's the first announcement, is we've got to be ready for 5 o'clock, is it? 5 o'clock up top, because that's when the buses are leaving to take us to wherever we're going. And because I'm going to forget, I also wanted to say a big thank you, because it's your wine we're going to be drinking when we get there, isn't it?
Yes, my wish was that you would actually get some of it right now, because it would certainly make what you're about to hear more palatable. But Anton said no, it's a professional audience. But thank you for the support. I still appreciate it. We wine farmers, I can moan if you want me to, but
yeah, we can do that. Maybe if we do that next year, maybe if we drink your wine at 4, we might encourage you to come back. But that's jumping ahead. Let's see how the next hour goes. So again, we want to bring your questions in. Slido's up and running. I'm sure if you can't remember how to get onto it, your neighbour can. Do ask the questions. We can see them coming through here. We're not going to do the same thing. That was very much a sort of journey of discovery and using that to kind of convey some of the decisions and processes that have been important for Willem. By the way, I don't know if you picked up on the discussions. One thing that he didn't say, which I think is actually key, and I know it's the same when you talk to Michael, he is just an unbelievable listener. His ability to go and listen and to draw you in, to learn more about you than the other way around, and to avoid hubris and arrogance and be humble in what he's doing, I just think is a skill which he couldn't mention because that would just go against everything I've said. But my feeling is that's been critical to his success and your success. But anyway, that's the history. Now we're going to start gearing up a little bit and looking more into the kind of future. A lot more thought about the technology, a lot more thought in terms of how Michael's looking at his investment portfolio, where he sees the trends. And I hope this sets us up nicely for tomorrow when we go through the AI piece with Roger and Dr. Javon Zeal. So what I do want to do, though, is let's just bring it up to date. You left FNB after an incredibly successful career in 2013,
10 years ago.
Okay.
A decade.
So let's start there. Why did you leave? And then let's just quickly go through those kind of 10 years and what you've been up to.
Well, it's Willem had a good reason. At some stage, I think it's important to step back. I think 10 years is a really good innings as a CEO. You have to be very careful that some of your mistakes don't become the mistakes of the larger organization. Those of you that have seen Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, where there's that golden ring that gives magical powers, and but it can also be quite dangerous because it consumes you, and then they give it to the Hobbit, and he's kind of an innocent guy, but even he struggles at some stage kind of to not put the ring on. What happens when you in power is that the people around you start kind of making you feel more important than you really are. And I can actually see why people like Mugabe wanted to stay in power forever, or Erdogan has just won his 10th election, or why Putin thinks he's going to win the war, etc. It's when people hang around too long, it changes you. So I really think it's one of the messages is you shouldn't stay there forever. You should make space for new ideas and then find other ways to influence it. So I always wanted to do 10 years and then come back to my family. We're living here. I was flying up and down. And, it was an incredible period. I learned so much. I think apart from, they pay you as a CEO, the growth you have as an individual by being a leader in, particularly the tough times is immense, the growth that you experience. But I could also never go back, even though I don't even know whether now I'm ready to be a CEO of a large bank, but I've certainly learned a hell of a lot subsequently, but I just couldn't go back running a 30,000 business again. Also because I believe in entrepreneurship, and I think, a lot of the big companies that are around today may not be around in 10 years' time, and some of the businesses that are here will be the big companies of the future. It's far more exciting to build new things.
So you had reasons for leaving, and did you also have the pull factor? So you always knew you wanted to set up an investment fund and to start supporting entrepreneurs. You obviously thought you had the capital, you were willing for the risk. Was that also part of the...
See, banking is an interesting thing. Banking really is mostly lending, or a lot of the banking business people think is all about lending. And in lending, you can't make mistakes. Or you can make 1 or 2% of your portfolio a year. That's about your margin. So you really try and make every decision correctly. And obviously the world I'm in now with venture capitalism and supporting startups and so on, you're going to make 50% of the companies you invest in are probably not going to make it. But you can still, as an overall portfolio, do much better than what you do in banking. So I knew I wanted to do that. I think I had seen in the First Rand Group, I was around when Willem, Willem, I think, had just been going for 2 years and so on. Same with Discovery. They'd just started and they had this pyramid with a medical savings scheme, which you had to understand and so on. You could really see how small businesses then, who people doubted, have grown into these kind of immensely profitable, complex, but also businesses that change the world for the better. And it was certainly one of the things that I did at FNB was trying to promote intrapreneurialism. And you could just see that that is so much more powerful a model than anything else that exists out there. If you have the right people, you give them in the right environment, you empower them, and they become CEOs. So FNB at the time had, like, anybody could call themselves a CEO of anything. There was no worry about the title, and they created that empowerment. You could see what that could do in a corporate, but I really was inspired to then go and kind of try it out myself by backing other entrepreneurs. So it wasn't that clearly defined. I just knew I wanted to get out of a corporate. I was fortunate to, over the years, have had a little bit of capital, and then I wanted to invest in entrepreneurs, and that's how the journey started.
What was your first investment?
It's one called Go Metro, and they do mobility solutions. To this day, I don't fully understand it, but what I've also learned is it's not so much about the technology or the idea, it is about the individual and the team. And if you can find the type of people who are passionate about making the world a better place, and they can convince you that they really understand the landscape and the technology, how they're going to do it, and importantly, if they have a track record of execution, magic can happen. I really do believe it's the only way the world has been changing is through people like that. So every now and then you find those entrepreneurs, then you've got to back them.
So that was the first investment. You've now got, I think, 25 approximately that are still going. I'm not sure how many have died along the way.
Some smaller ones, and by the way, that's the other lesson, is you have to fund things incrementally. Even Willem said 120 million, but you didn't get a check for 120, right? It would have been in tranches and as you hit milestones and so on. So that's the other important thing is, if businesses aren't going to make it, you have to recognize it pretty early on. And it's so nice to be a minority shareholder because then you can say no. The problem is if you run the business and so on, it's far tougher. It's far tougher on the individual entrepreneur. It's a very privileged position to be in when you have a number of different businesses where... And the funny thing is if you make 10 risky investments, but they are uncorrelated, chances are that overall portfolio is lower risk than government bonds.
Yeah, that's very much the case. We see that in Silicon Valley. What is it, the top Sequoias and the A60, 95% are kind of either going to fail or they're going to just, maybe they make a return 10, 15%. Their skill against the others is that 5% that go big. They go 100 times, 1,000 times.
So it's a power law that exists in venture capital. Look, it's actually a power law that exists out there. We just don't always notice it. But, most of the Springbok rugby team come from 10 schools and have always come, or 80% of them come from the same 10 schools. When you start looking for power laws, you'll find that everywhere in the universe. In big corporates, you will find that there's probably 1 or 2 or 3% of people that really make the big difference, for example.
Yeah. So on those power laws, have you changed much in terms of how you find companies to invest in, how you find people, and then your involvement with them and how you go and operate in those scenarios? Because obviously 10 years of experience is very different to that first one in Go Metro.
So look, I've run out of capital, so I'm not finding anyone else anymore. But it used to just be over coffee or wine, and I was fortunate. People came to me, but I suppose they do when they find that you have money to invest, because that is the shortage in South Africa, I think, is capital for these startup type of businesses. I learned in the process that you can't just have coffee with everyone, and references are very important. Just if you can bring me somebody who says that you've done something, and then my other criterion was just a track record of execution. Once again, I think in South Africa we're not short of thinking, including, by the way, government. That I don't think the problems are always at a policy level. It's just we're not getting cracking on implementing well.
Can you talk about that execution? Because you've got that on your website, I think, as a picture where
Yeah.
on the one side the idea, one to, factoring up, and on the
It's
the
a
other side.
multiplier of the idea. People overemphasize ideas. And look, I say that as a nerd or a geek or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I love ideas. I fall in love with ideas, fall in love with anything that seems to be a good idea to solve a problem. But it really isn't about the idea. One of the things they say, if you're a venture capitalist, if people approach you and they say, please sign the NDA, just, you can just cancel that meeting because it just shows the naivety. People think the idea is the precious thing. You basically can't shove good ideas down people's throats. You have to actually take that brilliant idea and then you have to go and execute it. And that really is the hard bit, I believe, about being an entrepreneur.
How important is purpose? I mean, we asked Willem about that. Purpose as opposed to kind of the standard for-profit motive.
For me, it's very important. But I don't think you can say as a general rule that only people who have purpose do well in life. I mean, I think there are some very hard-nosed, purely commercial people who don't care about purpose at all, and they do well. But it's not one I've chosen. I actually surprised myself when, after a couple of years, I looked at the portfolio, and they were all companies that were solving problems that I cared about. Whether it was power that could go green, or kids that don't have textbooks, or giving data to people that aren't connected. That's an important thing, making banking free, etc. So every single time there was some form of a purpose. And I just think I'm attracted to that. But that doesn't mean, let's use an example. I mean, I love eating a steak just like everyone. But I wouldn't want to invest in an abattoir. It just would give me no joy. If there's a good IRR or everything, I'd say, I'll leave that for somebody else. Maybe they can find a purpose in that. But for me, I like purpose. You want to make a difference in the world. And also, I think when I said it's all about people, I like to invest in people who kind of have that similar value set that said, I can do something that is really going to be a lot better. And how much better? I think the Silicon Valley thing is it can't be 10% better. You want to make things 10 times better. And actually, I think there are opportunities out there to do that.
All right, so that's a bit of history and a bit of insight into the thought process. So go out, have coffee, drink wine, meet people, and everything else will look after itself, and you can have a portfolio of 25 awesome companies. So we're glad we got that one.
Did I say all of that? Yeah.
I'm glad we got that sorted. I now want to move on to looking forward, but before we do that, anyone want to ask other questions on that theme? Anton, Dean? No?
See, that's why we needed the wine, Anton. Yeah.
We're waiting for the wine problem.
And so I'm worried now. I don't know if I gave you good advice. I mean, you can you can be the judge of that. Look, I think the nice thing about being an entrepreneur, Willem also said that, is you don't have to worry about the big picture. And I think it's very, very relevant in South Africa today, where the economy is really struggling, and we're doing some stupid things in terms of government policies and geopolitics and so on. But if you are an entrepreneur and you find a solution to a problem, it's far more important for you to actually make it work and get traction and make your customers happy and so on. Maybe in 5 or 10 or 20 years' time, when you're big, the size of the economy matters. But right now, it doesn't matter. In fact, if you have a really good answer, a solution, if there's pressure, now may be like the best time for entrepreneurs to come to the fore. So if you can control your environment, you could spend a lot of time going to big corporates, including banks, where the thing that kills startups is the long maybe. They don't even say no. They just say, no, it's very nice, and so on, and come and figuring out who the decision maker is, which is very complex in banks, and just one person can kill it. So anyway, I think that's where I was coming from, is But that's not to say that there aren't times where you want a big partner. I just think that the skill to engage with big corporates is actually not a typical startup skill. That is a kind of a very developed thing that some companies have figured out. I mean, if you're a SaaS and you want to sell into big corporates, they know how to sell into big corporates. But it's a very kind of developed discipline. So if it is something you want to do, I would just say then you really need to know what you do, and maybe it's for the right type of people, again, track record that have done that before. But what I do want to say is dealing with big banks and big government is 10 times easier than dealing with government. So I think, that's the one I really, really have kind of avoided. And that would be my advice. Again, unless you have a really, really, really good skill of dealing with government, rather make your world smaller, focus on those things that you can actually implement. And I hope it's right. We'll check again in 5 years' time. And then
He's still smiling, so
Yeah,
he's obviously
okay,
fine. Let's go on to technology. So, I don't know, most people here probably have heard of Singularity University, and if you haven't, well worth looking up and watching some of their events. Peter Diamandis, they've been going on about exponential trends for a decade or more now, and I think the first person I came across in South Africa who is more exponential in his thinking than Peter Diamandis' gang was you. You've obviously got a keen focus on what's happening now and thoughts about what's going in the future. Where do you see the trends that basically everyone here should be worried about, whether that's social, economic, technology?
So Roger, who you listen to tomorrow, actually got me onto Singularity. And Roger, I don't think you've been. It's bizarre how it works. I've read all the books, went there. I've attended some of the events here in South Africa, but it wasn't quite the same. There's something about going to Silicon Valley and being lectured to by the people that are actually practitioners. If it's 3D printing, it'll be somebody who shows you how they're 3D printing, and if it's personalized medicine, they'll show you the projects that they're working on. That is actually quite inspirational. I mean, I don't want to. I mean, I think America gets a lot wrong, starting from gun possession and so on, but they've got that gig right about startups. So that really did influence my mind. And that famous line about the future is already here; it's only unevenly distributed. If you had to stop all technological development today, I mean, there's a school of thought that says we should do it with AI, but let's say you stopped it on everything. I think the world would still take 20 years to catch up, to bring all those technologies into the businesses of today. I mean, in other words, the way that we still work today hasn't taken account of AI as it is now, or virtual reality, or augmented reality, or Internet of Things, or all of these different type of technologies. Which, I mean, we can run through all of those technologies, but I think the thing that people miss is that you don't have to be on top of the primary science to build a good business, because the businesses are built through business model innovation. Let me just use a stupid example. Your phone has a location device on it. You can call that the technology because it's, I don't know, from GPS, and your device says where you are, and you can send that signal to somebody. But somebody said that it sucks to wait for a taxi. In fact, when I'm in London, I still don't quite know the rules. If you walk out and you were there first, but somebody comes out of another building 50 meters before you, and they pick up the taxi first, is that fair? I just don't know how it works. It rains a lot, then you stand in the rain. So for me, being able to summons a taxi, knowing where they are when they arrive, also not having the tip pressure, is a 10x better experience for me. But you can say now, is that advanced technology or not? Maybe it's advanced because it's GPS, maybe it's simple because it's just a location-based service on a phone. But somebody figured out how to turn that into a business model. Those are the opportunities that I think we are still scratching the surface at. Because, let's just explore a little bit here. There are a lot of people in South Africa that, let's say there's crime, they don't know where the closest police station is, or more importantly, where the closest police person or police car is. And then they can't explain to them how to get there because they don't have a formal address. So why isn't there an Uber-like system for the police in South Africa or in the world? I'm here, I have an emergency, where's the closest cop, can they come to me? So it's just a stupid little example of a technology that exists that can solve a very real problem that no one has kind of thought about. So I'm still super, super, super optimistic about the world and what can be done with all the technology if all the technological development stopped now and stopped for the next 10 years. However, they're not stopping. They are growing, as you said, at an exponential rate. ChatGPT, as amazing as it is now, is going to be supremely different in 5 years' time. And the cost of data, which is coming down, is going to come down so much more. personalized medicine, the things that are going to be able to extend our lifetimes by 10 years are definitely coming. You've got to live as healthy as you can now so that you give yourself adequate time, kind of to get to that escape velocity where, for every 10 years you live now, mankind on average is living 1.3 years longer. So you are gaining, but that 1.3 years is increasing.
Do you want to just say that again? Say that again.
For every 10 years you live now, mankind on average is living another 1.3 years extra. Because in that 10 years, we're learning more about diet, we're learning more about exercise, we're learning more about preventative medicines. There are breakthroughs that are being made. And that 1.3 is actually increasing. So you just got to, the longer you live, the longer you're going to get a chance to live even more. And the technologies, I'm just using that as one example. But everything is getting better and better. A lot of these things have been worked on for a very long time and have been derided. AI, for example, if you look it up, started 60 years ago. And school after school of people said it's great, and then I got disillusioned, didn't work. And now, after 60 years, it's starting to work. There are many more such technologies out there. I'll give you an example. I think energy, we're going to solve energy. Nuclear fusion or nuclear fission, some of the first commercial ones are now going to hit the market in 5 years' time. It sounds like a long time, but hopefully we're all still around in 5 years' time. It's green, and it's cheaper. The energy is going to become abundant. Now, just think about that for a second. If energy becomes cheap and abundant, hard to think of in South Africa with load shedding and so on, but okay, this is what's happening in the world. What new industries that until now weren't possible because it cost too much in electricity will suddenly be possible? I mean, I can think of one, silly one, being a farmer, is all along the west coast of Africa where it's dry, but you're next to the sea. You can now turn seawater into fresh water because the technology already exists, it just takes power. So you should be buying huge swaths of dry land now, which you can pick up for nothing, knowing that in a couple of years you can irrigate it all. That's a very basic farmer's example. I'm sure you guys can think of much better things where if power costs nothing, what's going to happen to the world.
I can't resist. Let's fast forward 20 or 30 years and continue that out. If we go and see energy becoming free, I mean, this is profound because this disrupts basic economics.
Correct.
When something is abundant and there is no scarcity, there is no supply and demand curve anymore, it becomes free.
No.
Air is
Economics
free.
hasn't caught up to that yet, by the way, but yes.
Air is free because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Now we've got free energy, which allows to do automation with AI to go and create the robots and the tools that we need in industrial plants so that every single person, in theory, can get access to whatever it was, whether it's creating the water we need or the homegrown irrigation or the 3D plants in our roof.
You can come up with many more examples, and there would be even more if we had a proper bottle of wine and we could really think about it.
Okay, but two things. Is that, I mean, this is obviously a long way away, but is it potentially likely in terms of the way, because you're very much in that abundance mindset.
Yes, but I'm not sure what more I should say about that.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think that through. So let's go back a step there, because this is in the future.
My point on the economics is when things go to zero, it's not measured in GDP, and it's not measured in inflation.
Yeah.
So economists conveniently ignore that. But even now, today, we are doing value-added things that are not measured as GDP, and so I'm actually saying our GDP is higher, and our inflation is lower than all the official statistics say. Just as an example. But you're quite right. These things are going to get abundant, and then we're just going to take it for granted. I got here because Google Maps drove me here, or I have access to all the information in the world for free through Google. That is hugely, hugely valuable, but it's not measured anyway. And there's going to be more and more of it.
I just want to go. Sorry, who wants? I'm going to ask one more question, and I've got to go back to these guys. Sorry, I just keep forgetting you're there. So you mentioned essentially, I think it's kind of Martek's law, where you've got this technology which is going like this, and you've got this inertia, which was typically so governments are the slowest, and then organizations and sort of companies which are only able to, and I guess society in terms of how we adopt it. So we've got a 20-year lag for existing technologies. I saw a fax machine the other day, I couldn't believe it. Do you think that changes much now because these new technologies are coming through, they're accelerating so fast? And the opportunity for entrepreneurs like here to actually step in and do exactly what Willem said, where he'd identified and generated a new model with new actuarial stats to actually create a blue ocean product, and the incumbents were too slow. Do you think the opportunity now is available, or is it still too difficult for organizations to move this
No,
quickly?
the disruptive gap between the status quo and consumer behavior, because you've got to throw that in there, and what is possible is just growing
Yeah.
all the time. It's sometimes quite a frustrating thing as a provider of the service, where you go like, this thing is so damn good, why aren't more people buying it? Which means there's still a lot of room for traditional marketing and sales to change that behavior. You will find, okay, what can I use an example? People don't change their bank accounts that easily. But now there's an alternative, Bank Zero, which is free, really, really free,
You've only got 2 minutes for this
to
punt. eh?
punt it. And customers can save roughly 10 to 20 billion a year if they just, went, and yet they don't. So you need to educate them and so on. Rain, I mean, the Wi-Fi offer.
You're not going to do all 25
I won't do
countries,
all
are you?
25. No, it's just, it only works for you still market. Willem again, I mean, he said the phone rang, but they became supremely good at advertising,
Yeah.
knowing which, where to advertise, which leads were the best ones, which converted the best, where the risk ratings were, and so on. It became a very sophisticated science. But these things don't just happen, with the odd exception. An exception, I think, has been ChatGPT. It's one of the fastest apps that has been adopted. They got that virality going. But I'm saying, as a rule, changing people's behavior is quite difficult unless you bring up something that didn't exist at all. But the moment you start competing with the status quo, it is quite difficult. So anyway, I'm just saying that is still the opportunity. And then the other one in South Africa, of course, is that you can see trends that have happened overseas where we are a bit behind. And in some cases, South African companies aren't going to make it. I mean, I was, for my sins, involved for a short while with Mixit. Mixit could have been the WhatsApp, but they just fell behind. They didn't see that jump to smartphones. And some of those things, you just know the big American companies have the network effect that they're going to win. But there are many, many other places where there are huge opportunities for South African businesses to do well, based on business model innovation that you've seen overseas. So anyway, I am not that optimistic that government is going to get its act into order quickly. But I think all that means is that there are more and more and more opportunities for entrepreneurs here in South Africa. It's a very, very exciting time for us to solve the problems.
Let's a question about payments. And you're talking about looking overseas. If you look at China, but no real credit card economy, and you see this huge penetration as people go onto the chat platforms that become apps within apps. And now you've got beggars on the street with QR codes and organizing wallet transfers with 0.00 yen transactions, incredibly cheap. Huge volumes. I think I saw the last time, it was a year or two back, the volumes in 1 year is something like 30 trillion. It's bigger than the United States GDP. It's crazy. Here we are in South Africa, and I thought, this is going to take off like wildfire. It's never happened. Why do you think that is?
So China is a great example of the future's already here. It's just not it's not evenly distributed. I mean, those of you that have been there, apart from at your hotel, you can't pay with a credit card. If you go to an informal market, everyone's got a QR code and the payments there are free, which is the way it should be. And now, thanks, sir, it's available there. Every single one has a QR code on the back of their card and so on. There's obviously a bit of a network effect that needs to happen because you need to have both the payer and the recipient to have it for that free transaction to happen. But the alternative is there. Now I come back to the marketing and the education and telling people that those possibilities exist. If you had to start, the way to test your business is to start from first principles or a blank sheet of paper and say, like, forget about everything you know now. How would you design it for in 3 or 5 years' time? And you most certainly wouldn't have branches, and you wouldn't have big head offices, and you wouldn't have a wine collection and an art collection. You would build a kick-ass app that makes transactions free. Now, I'm telling you, it already exists. Now it's just a question of persuading people that they want to use it. That's the big startup challenge. That's execution, it's marketing, sales.
We'll come back to that maybe if we've got time, but okay, over to you guys, otherwise I'll be in trouble.
Sadly.
But you said that creates a lot of opportunities for us to solve problems. Have you got any examples that are most exciting to you or most relevant?
I think every instance of state failure is a market opportunity. So if they can't keep SAA in the air, there's going to be Lyft, which can start an airline at a tenth of the price. If it's a schooling system that is producing horrendous results, you saw this thing, 10-year-olds can't read for meaning. There are private schools, and we're not just talking the Michael Houses of the world and so on. There are affordable private schools that are kind of drawing the good teachers, using technology. If it's medical care, I mean, I'd hate to be reliant on a state hospital, but we've actually got world-class private type hospitals. Admittedly, this is for people who can afford it. Now it carries on. I mean, there are going to be opportunities in water. There certainly are opportunities in power. I mean, the power sector is absolutely booming. If I can just make an example of that, I said it's not about the technology per se. So solar technology is improving at a learning rate of over 20%, which means every time the production of solar doubles, the cost comes down by 20%. It's on this incredible curve. It's just getting better and better. Same with battery technology. But the real thing that we have found in South Africa, again, to come back to business model innovation, is people don't have the capex up front. So I'm involved in the business. I'm not even going to mention the name because then I punt it.
Please, no, I want to know,
is
I
just
want
you
to know
go
the
to
name.
people and you say, we'll put this stuff up on your roof with everything that's needed. All you need to do is buy the electricity from us at 20% less than Eskom. So it's a no-brainer. And that's kind of where the economics are right now. So there's another one. So it's power. I said water. It's if there are potholes in the road, Willem, I think, again, that's what OUTsurance did. And I know Discovery's doing it now. They're fixing the potholes. And people are so happy that they, give the brand credit. Or, no, maybe OUTsurance did the roadsman. So now traffic stuffed up, the traffic police. And they got at an opportunity. And it was a great brand building exercise. I'd argue much more than putting billboards at a rugby game is having, somebody help you when the traffic lights are. So every single instance of government failure is becoming a private sector opportunity. What we have in South Africa is privatization, not by design, but by default. That's what's happening. So they don't want to call it privatization, but the people that are going to solve this country are the entrepreneurs and the capitalists and the business people that care about the country and are going to solve all these problems. It's exciting, in a way. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Aaron from Moment. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for what you just said about solar, because that's exactly what we do. We finance solar,
Okay.
but then we also have a blockchain wallet for next to free peer-to-peer transactions. So I'm not just doing a self-punt. The real question is, what would you say is going to be our biggest challenge? You just mentioned one of them being adoption and the sales cycle. Is that going to be the only one? What would you flesh out from an investor perspective? Also not looking for capital because I know you don't have it.
Thank you.
As an investor,
Yeah.
how would you evaluate this and go, these are going to be your biggest challenges?
So let me
Great
just understand,
question.
you specifically asking, so what would be the problem in getting wider solar adoption in South Africa?
Distribution of the product.
There's a story I
But
read.
it's not the solar. You're talking about the people investing in with via the blockchain technology.
Yeah, so it's a blockchain wallet. You can invest in solar installations that give you a yield because people are paying
Yeah.
their electricity bill, but it also has the built-in wallet means you can transact peer-to-peer with anyone. And we see mostly Nigeria sort of using that product, although crypto is sort of banned.
The story I read, you guys may actually know the actual details, is there was a bridge over the river in some American city, and it was always, there was always a traffic jam. So the authorities built a metro underneath. So you could use the metro and get your work kind of cheaper and quicker, but people didn't use it. They wanted to be in their car, and they kind of kept on being upset, but they drove there. And then there was an accident or something where they had to close the bridge for a couple of weeks or a month. So people were forced to use the metro. And then when they opened the bridge again, then people never really returned back to it. Sometimes you need that type of big change to happen. I think that is what's happening with solar panels right now. It took a very long time. Actually, I don't understand why so long, because the NPV to put on solar for businesses particularly has been around for some time. Makes less sense for residences with batteries and so on, but for businesses during daytime, every school, every hospital, anyone should be using them. And I think what's happened now in South Africa is the equivalent of that bridge being closed by having load shedding. That they say it's level 4, but it feels like level 8, the amount of time that is off. So, and the amount of solar that is now being, that has been installed in the first 3 months of this year is just under 3 gigawatts, which is nearly 3 levels of load shedding. So if that continues in 2 years' time, we will have solved it. So it is happening. About blockchain, where I think the opportunity is, and I may not have fully understood what you do, is if you put on solar panels on your roof, it's obviously very suboptimal if everybody just tries to do their own little thing. So if you can sell when you have a surplus and buy in when you don't have, even if it's just in your neighborhood. I think it's going to be a distributed, devolved, smart grid that we're going to have, that it doesn't even have to be connected to the national grid. And blockchain seems to be a very efficient way of measuring the sums between all the different houses and immediately kind of putting money in their wallet. So I actually think it's a great opportunity by putting those two technologies together. I don't know how you bring Nigeria in there, though. That's
At the back, David?
No. No, it's not a chance. No, because, look, first of all, like in South Africa, I think in most politics in the world, people make their cross based on how they feel about somebody and about whether that person's part of my tribe, and I use it in the broader sense, and not based on like true knowledge of kind of what the policies are that they're going to be implemented and so on. So it's a very different environment to the only one I know, which is you've got a clear mandate, you've got a strategy, you've got accountability to shareholders, etc. I do want South Africa to get better, much, much better. I care about the country deeply, but the way in which I feel my talents can best be used is in supporting entrepreneurs who are getting on with it and doing it. So, no, I'm not the political answer, sorry. I'm sorry? I would still?
We'll all vote for you.
Oh,
We'll all
thank
vote for
you. Yeah.
Oh no, don't wish that on him. But actually, just on that ESCOM thing, can I just continue? Because you highlighted nicely how the solar industry over there is just going to continue getting cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
Productivity goes up, cost goes down. You don't even have to invent anything, just supply chain economics.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is it works the opposite way, so you've got a vicious circle for ESCOM where there's less demand, therefore prices go up, less suppliers, things break, they can't find the manufacturers anymore. So you've got a precarious forecast where the price is actually going to go up exponentially, and therefore who's going to move away quickest? Everyone in this room and everyone else, and you're left with a major issue. How do you see that one playing
ESCOM
out?
is in a death spiral.
Yeah.
That's what you've just explained. It's in a death spiral, and it's I don't know what debts they have, 460 billion, and now government's going to give them another 200 billion. So it's a disaster. It really is a disaster. I just hope that in a way it transitions us to the new model of the future in any event. So the new model of the future is this. It's going to be deployed, decentralized, a lot of self-generation, etc. What ESCOM has that I think they realize is they still have the grid. That grid is a super powerful thing, and it's a natural monopoly. What they don't seem to be very good at is the actual power generation and those type of big units. And I think that is what is being privatized by default in any event.
Thanks for that. Sorry.
Build it and they will come. So the answer to the first question is no. I had no idea. When I left FNB, that certainly wasn't on my horizon. And I didn't really want to compete against I can't say FNB was my baby, but obviously if you work on something so intensely, give your whole life to it and so on, I didn't want to go and compete against it. I mean, I always look at these rugby players and I just wonder how does RG Snyman now play against the Stormers and that type of thing, But okay, they're optimizing for their own careers, so that's fine. No, the story involved red wine. See, once again, Anton red wine. As I bumped into Yatin Narsi, the guy who runs it now, the CEO. He ran FNB Retail, and before that he was the CIO. And he actually pitched me on an idea which I at this time thought was a silly idea. It was like a better way to do ATMs using the Raspberry Pi computing system. So he thought he could bring the cost down from 200,000 to 2,000 for an ATM and so on. And I basically said it was a stupid idea because all you're doing is you're making cash easier, and the future isn't cash, it's electronic. And anyway, But this was after 2 bottles of wine and so on. And then we said, now, what would you do if you started a bank but without legacy technology? Because, all the big banks still run on COBOL, just like one, and it works, but COBOL and mainframes. But maybe more importantly, what are the legacy fee streams, the things you can't really justify anymore? And then there are quite a few other things, the open source technology that you can use. It's free, small teams, etc. And we just then kind of developed this thing, which is really massively transformative purpose, big words. We wanted to make banking free, hence the name, Bank Zero. And there's a small team there. There's no institutional investment there. It's people that have been working for some time without salaries, put in their own capital, and it's all part of this making banking free and keeping it free. What it does now then allows, like once you own your full stack, first, Willem, I've never kind of heard the story as you've told it, but it's the same type of thing. Now you own your own destiny and you can do a lot of innovation on top of it and so on. It sets you up for the future. What we haven't done yet, what all is advertise, and it's like a constant kind of debate that we have at board level, because I really think we should. There are not that many products that just sell itself. You have to tell people about your value proposition. And there's so much noise around, there's so many billboards, so many messages, you kind of make it very, very clear. So that hopefully will be our next phase. We are partnering though, we partnered with the Icoca, so that's actually been great. Our customers asked for it. Icoca, obviously are dealing with other banks. It doesn't even have to be exclusive. But that's kind of our model, is we want to just be part of an ecosystem, focusing purely on transactional banking, making and keeping it free, and then partnering with partners all around us.
What time horizons do you have when you look at these investments? And
the further... Okay, the successful founders live in the future. And what I mean with live in the future is that they really have developed an understanding of the macro trends and how the world would look like in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time. And interesting, I find that, even though you speak to somebody who's in solar, they will actually have a good understanding of electric vehicles. And somebody who's in spectrum will have a good understanding of what's happening in the Internet of Things and so on. So people live in the future. If you have a startup, if you have the capital and the ability to do it, you really don't have to make money out of the business model of today. You've got to put your chips on how the world is going to be. It sounds kind of like an obvious thing, but maybe the most important thing you can do for yourself and for your team is have a fairly strong view of how the world is going to be in 3 or 5 years' time, or your industry is going to be, and then build what you want to build based on that. And obviously, as things change, you may also need to change. But it's far more powerful to build your business for 5 years' time than it is for now. Again, this quote you've heard, I don't know whether Wayne Gretzky was super smart or he just said this, but that famous quote of this Canadian hockey player, when they asked him, why are you so good? He said, well, I think it's because I go where the puck is going to, not where the puck is. That is maybe the most important thing in business, is you've got to focus on where you think the puck is going.
And then we'll come over across to you there, Maurice. So if you're looking forward on your investments and the thing, 5, 10 years, and the founders are, what movie are you in terms of profit? So on these American models, we've got Amazon, which went 20 years before it turned a profit. I don't think Twitter ever has really. Are you happy to run that with, you can do it on funding, massive, negative cash flow, negative profit, but value because you've got millions of customers. It's a platform, and you can wait the 6 to 10 years, because that's not a very South African investment model.
No, you see, I suppose it depends on how much capital or cash you have at your disposal. I think some of the great businesses in the world have been built because they had the fortune of, in the group somewhere, having a cash cow that they then could keep on investing. Arguably one of the best venture capital deals ever done is what Naspers did with Tencent, right? But they were able to do it because they had a monopoly, a big monopoly in South Africa on satellite TV that was just churning out the cash, and then you can actually afford to take all of these chances. So if you have the cash, you can take bigger bets, bigger risk, and you can think further into the future. On the other hand, in South Africa, the thing that is in short supply, I don't have it anymore, is capital. So you are kind of forced to actually deal with the commercial realities. Now, that also has a benefit, because you're not going to have a WeWork, for example, where people just kind of trust in you that you're going to make all the profit in the future. So there's no there's no one-size-fits-all answer here, but I do think there's value in the discipline that South Africa teaches you, that cash is in short supply, and you actually have to prove yourself right now. Arguably, the other business that has done kind of the best over the very long term is Amazon. And Amazon, for many, many, many years, didn't have a profit, But they took their investors along with them. They explained it to them upfront. They said, we can make money, but we are going to take this money and we're going to reinvest it. And they were able to prove that they really were making money. And the benefit over 10 years, if you take your profit and you don't pay taxes on it at whatever rate,
Free
20%
funding.
or 30%, that's a 30% extra advantage that you have over your competitors if you can just keep on reinvesting it. So, in short, I suppose what I'm saying is if you have unlimited capital at your disposal and you know you're doing the right thing, then it's an awesome advantage to be able to keep on reinvesting for the future.
Yeah.
But you also need to know what you're doing, because not everybody, they say we could make a profit anytime we want. That's not always the case. And one of the good things about South Africa is it sifts the good from the bad by forcing that somewhat earlier.
Marius.
Hi, Michael. Colin over there is one of those guys that strongly feel that the formal banks as we know them, will stop to exist. I think he thinks pretty soon.
Did you work for a bank?
With a specific focus on one bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
But do you think that, there's truth to that, or do you think the big banks will be able to reinvent at least parts of themselves? Because, back in the dot-com era, that was all online, but a lot of the bricks and mortars, basically, that they've been able to add internet channels onto their historic business, and therefore had the capital to invest in. So, do you have a view if the big banks will...
I've personally been I'm too early too often. I think things are going to happen quicker and then they don't happen. Solar took much longer than I thought it would, and there are a whole lot of other technologies that you see and immediately you think they should happen. And in banking in particular, customer behavior is a big driver of this. People don't like moving bank accounts for a lot of reasons. Their debit orders are coming off them and their salary goes into them, and it's just a hassle and a schlep. There are kind of a few pain points. So it's less of a comment on the legacy systems of the banks and their cost structures and so on than it is on consumers. I mean, it's actually even a little bit frustrating is South African consumers, if they sat down for a few hours and they went through all their expenses, short-term insurance, life insurance, the DSTV premium, etc., they could save so much money that if you equated that into hours worked after tax, would be 100 hours. So for putting in a few hours, they could kind of save all that money, but they don't. And that's maybe coming back to the role of marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So clearly, I've put my bet on the fact that there will be new models and new technology. You need to be a little bit patient. You need to keep your costs low, which is something that we've done. So I'll bet on that one. Because I think ultimately, banks and many other big corporates are going to struggle because of the investments in legacy technology and these huge, huge cost structures that they have. But, your feeling on how likely you are to change your bank account is as relevant as is the business model of these old type of institutions. It's consumer behavior that is going to change it. And it doesn't help just moaning about your bank. You actually have to do something about it. You have to switch. So please do.
Obviously, you were a great CEO, right? And you have an investment, you handle investments, but you're constantly in this world of changes, in this innovation. How does this influence you? And this is a very personal question for me because I want to go that way. As a winemaker, which is a much more traditional
Yes.
space,
Yes.
smack technology.
Yes. So first of all, you must take no lessons from me being in the wine business. It is the stupidest business you can possibly think of. You're not doing it for money. You're doing it for a whole host of reasons. And once you've made peace with that, that's fine. So you live in a beautiful place. I'm in the Western Cape. And then also, I had a real need after many years of not producing anything tangible to produce a bottle or something that you can touch and feel and smell and share with your mates and have good stories and have a great life experience. I also get a joy out of job creation and on the farms where we are getting rid of alien vegetation, bringing back the nature, establishing mountain biking trails, and so it's a whole lot of other joys that you get out of it. And plus the final one is the wines we make in South Africa are exceptional. In blind tastings, they measure up with and sometimes often beat some of the best wines in the world. And, to be able to do that out of kind of this wild continent, it also gives joy. But I think that's inspirational for some of the businesses that we start. There are some businesses that we have here that really are more advanced. I listened to Adrian Gould speak about Discovery. I mean, the way Discovery does business here is far more advanced than the market in the UK is. The way we do banking in South Africa is far more advanced than the check-based system that Americans still have. You know, and our wine, you know, in blind tastings outperform the French wines that cost 3 or 4 or 5 times as much as ours. So, you know, you just get joy out of living in a great place, creating jobs, doing all of these things. What doesn't give joy is selling it below cost price, but we're working on that. So, at least, you know.
That's why
Yeah.
I'm planning to follow in that direction.
My tip is to drink the wine.
Well, we're going to be able to do that in about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Which technologies are you just thinking are completely overhyped and oversold, and actually either permanently they're going to be wet, damp squibs, or actually we just got to be patient 5-10 years, obviously?
They all go through that cycle, right? There's that cycle, and everyone gets overhyped, and then they go through a long period again, and then they come out again. Look, clearly the one everyone's talking about now is AI. I do think it'll change the world. You know, what a whole lot of technology did to automate blue-collar jobs, and then a lot of technology came along that added productivity to white-collar jobs. Here, for the first time, we have something that can actually destroy or take out 70% of what doctors, lawyers, chartered accountants, management consultants, marketeers, and so on do. At the same time, I just think everybody's on this bandwagon right now. Not
I'm
everybody's.
just glad I wasn't one of those jobs you mentioned, so that's okay.
But the underlying, I remain bullish on it. Blockchain, I think, is also potentially revolutionary because, I mean, you asked a question about the big banks and so on. At least when it comes to payment systems, it's already far, far more efficient. Anyone who's ever made a payment abroad from out of South Africa or gets payments in here versus, you know, make a Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever type of transfer, will just immediately, intuitively see how it's so much better. And yet I think the blockchain sometimes is just overused. People have found a solution and they want to apply it to every single problem. Where you have to say, but, you know, would a well set up centralized database not kind of do that better? So I find the level of ideological fervor maybe the most when it gets to these different type of cryptocurrencies.
What about the metaverse and Web 3.0 and decentralized autonomous organizations,
Yeah.
IoT? I'm just moving away because
So people use those words a lot, and then you say, but what exactly is Web 3?
yeah.
What is it? What is it exactly? I mean, that's definitely an advancement on what we have right now. And DAOs are smart contracts. I absolutely see a role for them as well. And in fact, what I was suggesting there with the solar was smart contract. But anyway, like all those words and all the concepts and so on behind them and so on, I haven't seen enough use cases for me that really make sense. But I do think they'll happen. So sorry, I'm not in the corner of saying like it's useless tech. It's just tech that is very far hyped compared to, you know, the actual practical things I see them do.
Okay, maybe last couple of questions. I've got one question I just want to throw in as well.
My thoughts on?
Open banking.
It's not working, even in some of the advanced economies. I mean, again, I haven't seen like a lot of startups that are working with the banks. Banks obviously aren't that keen on kind of sharing their data. It is something that has a lot of customer benefit, and if done properly, will give rise to this ecosystem approach that I was talking about earlier, because banks are sitting on a lot of data. But that's also one, I wouldn't say overhyped, it's just way behind what the expectations were when it was launched. So I think it'll come. I mean, maybe examples like Ozo and what they're doing is a form of open banking. It's not what is traditionally intended by it, which is kind of the data that you then use, but it is the fact that they are actually getting access to accounts and settling and so on. That's kind of a form of open banking. The thing about banks is that as much as we can also point fingers at them, and now I'm actually going to defend the old banks and so on, is they look after your money, and if your money is gone, it has massive consequences, not just for you, but the wider economy, and so it is with the payment system. And you also feel you want to trust them with your data. You actually don't want them. I get irritated if my bank phones me to sell me I've got a phone call this morning well, you can figure out which bank it is, trying to sell me life insurance and so on. It irritates me. So they're trying to monetize the data themselves. I think many people prefer a conservative bank that doesn't share their data with anyone and will just look after their money. So there's going to be room for unsexy, safe banks in the world. Especially, I mean, the American banking sector, if they mark to market their long-term bond portfolio, there are different estimates out there, but it's just under $1 trillion of losses that are not recognized at the moment. Then there's one big bank in the world. I mean, this is quite an amazing figure I'm going to give you now, that if they had to mark just their bond portfolio to market, it's a $1.6 trillion loss. Do you guys know which bank I'm talking about? I tweeted it, so anyone who's followed me will know.
ICBC, I don't know.
It's the Fed. So the Fed is bankrupt right now by $1.6 trillion. So I'm saying that we all want our banking system to be safe again. And I think that's going to be the priority, not open banking.
2010, last one here, 2000, and there is a reason which I'll make clear while I'm reading this to you. I think this was from Tech Central. Michael Jordaan's personal Twitter feed is pithy and often funny.
Pithy?
Yeah, he feels...
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Afrikaans, I don't
know either. I'm assuming it's good. It goes on to say he fields compliments...
It's not someone who lisps.
It was, I think Duncan MacLeod wrote that, I don't know. It fields compliments and complaints with a deftness you wouldn't expect from a banker.
You know, I've found Twitter like right in the beginning and just started playing around with it and obviously made some mistakes and so on. And then at the time it became a really, really powerful tool for communicating when other people weren't. And you could communicate kind of product launches or different angles, or if a journalist wrote an article, now he suddenly had a public way of responding. He said, no, but you missed that point and so on. So, but I think you need to play with it. I mean, I follow Elon Musk on Twitter. I don't agree with like a lot of things that he does, but he plays and he's got a sense of humor, and there's something about that discourse that's important.
How important is it for the CEOs here? Because you've got 250,000 followers.
You know, breaking down barriers. So what you want to do, what old companies had was a highly developed structure, and people had different like job ratings and gradings and reporting into everyone and so on. And it had probably the benefit that you could scale and it could handle big volumes and so on. It was like a machine. But in the process, communication in the business suffers, you know, if you have to always communicate to all these different levels. I think something like email, and just copying people on email, has actually broken down a lot of those barriers, so kind of communication is better. But that wasn't possible outside the organization. So they would complain if something went wrong to a complaints department, and they would maybe at the end of the month say, these are the top 10 complaints or something, or not, or it wouldn't get to you, or you wouldn't know immediately that that branch had been robbed, that ATM isn't working, this product is down, etc. So, and that's what Twitter has done. And then also by you being the CEO, you not only see it, but you can actually respond to it quickly. I can tell you that many of the great product ideas of FNB came out of the feedback from customers. A lot of the ads, some of you may remember that ad campaign of Steve. It was a very, very successful ad campaign that irritated a whole lot of people because basically it was telling a lot of people they're silly for not, you know, kind of banking with us and so on. All the ideas for that ad campaign came out of what customers were saying on Twitter. So there's a big conversation happening out there in the world, and you've got to be part of it. You've got to learn how to go around with the tools, because it can be quite nasty. People sometimes give quite feedback. You know, you have to be careful what you say. I've made some stupid mistakes myself as well. But lean into it. Get involved in that conversation. You get great feedback. You get customers telling you what to do next. You can announce your things, tell your side of the story. So.
Awesome. Well, expect to see everyone here on Twitter later today, but maybe not after a few bottles of wine.
Yeah. Don't drink and tweet.
Michael, thank you very, very much.
Round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to me. See you later. Thank you.